I still remember the day I packed my bags and left my small hometown, a day that marked both an end and the beginning of something I never expected. I had always dreamed of a fresh start in a new state, one where I could build a life on my own terms. At 21, fresh out of college and full of hope, I had accepted a job offer in a city a couple of hours away. I stayed initially with my older sister, whose apartment was modest but filled with warmth and the promise of new beginnings. The work environment was challenging at first, but as days turned into weeks, I started to love the new city, its vibrant energy, and the prospect of independence. My boyfriend, James, who is 24 and with whom I had been in a relationship for 6 long years, had promised to join me once he sorted out his own problems. Our love story had its own rhythm, a slow, steady beat that seen us through years of ups and downs. James was supportive, even when our relationship felt like a roller coaster. But just before I moved out, he confessed that he couldn't leave immediately because his driver's license had been suspended. He needed time to fix it, so he could follow me to the new city. I understood. Life isn't always perfect, and sometimes circumstances force you to wait. In November of 2024, I made the leap. I left behind the familiar sights of my hometown for a future that shimmered with possibilities. For the first few months, everything felt like a scene from a movie. The exhilaration of a new job, the thrill of independence, and the sweetness of newfound freedom. I was beginning to believe that I had finally found the right path. I had no idea that a tiny secret hidden deep inside me was about to change everything. During the first month of my new city, while adjusting to a new work routine and exploring my new surroundings, I began noticing subtle changes in my body. I missed a period. At first, I dismissed it as one of those quirks of my irregular cycle, a byproduct of stress and the excitement of starting over. But as days passed, a quiet worry took root. When James visited me over New Year's Eve, staying for almost a full month, he noticed my concern for my well-being. He bought me a pregnancy test. I remember holding the plastic device in my hand as I waited for the results, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. When the test showed 2 dark lines, a clear indication that I was pregnant, I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. James's expression had been one of shock, but in his eyes, I saw an unspoken promise. We had talked about our future on countless nights, about marriage and family, and I believed that this was the natural next step in our journey together. I was overjoyed. I envisioned us planning a wedding, decorating a nursery, and imagining the laughter of our future child. In that moment, I felt that the universe was aligning perfectly for us. Even though we hadn't always been careful about contraception throughout our long relationship, I had convinced myself that this unexpected twist was exactly what we both wanted. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The practicalities of pregnancy soon forced me to confront harsh realities. My new health insurance was tied to the city I had moved to, but it did not cover the services I needed. It only covered me in my hometown, the very place where James lived with his parents. After a series of agonizing phone calls and rushed emails, I was forced to make a difficult decision. I had to move back to my hometown to secure proper treatment from an obstetrician who was covered by my plan. I arranged to stay at my father's house, a place filled with childhood memories and a sense of safety, even though I hadn't been there in years. Returning to my hometown was bittersweet. I had grown to love the independence and promise of the new city, yet now I was retreating back to familiar territory out of necessity. It was here, amid the echoes of my past, that my world began to unravel further. I was now officially 9 weeks pregnant, and everything that I had planned for the future was suddenly overshadowed by uncertainty. James had known about the pregnancy for 3 weeks. We had scheduled my first ultrasound appointment together, and I had been reminding him every day, buzzing with excitement over the idea of starting a family. I had even shared my dreams of a life filled with laughter, cozy family dinners, and long walks in the park with our child in tow. Yet, as the day of my first ultrasound approached, a growing tension crept into our relationship. James, who had promised to be involved in every step of this journey, began to act strangely. A week before the appointment, he told me he couldn't come because his parents needed him for a consultation regarding his father's upcoming surgery. It was the same day, same building, just on a different floor. An explanation that seemed plausible enough at first, but something about his evasiveness left me unsettled. We had agreed that once I received the ultrasound photo, we would share the news with his parents, who had become like second parents to me over the years. Instead, as the appointment day dawned, James had not only postponed telling anyone, but had also begun to send mixed signals that made me feel like I was no longer a priority. When I asked him about his plans to inform his older sister, she herself was 7 months pregnant and someone who should have understood the significance of this news. He brushed it off. It wasn't the right time, he said, shrugging as if the matter were trivial. Yet, deep down, I sensed that his silence was intentional. The day after the ultrasound, I learned that he had casually mentioned to his sister that I was only 3 weeks pregnant, claiming it was too early to reveal anything. I confronted him, upset that he had spread misinformation without even consulting me. His response was infuriating in its nonchalance. Can you please explain to me what the issue is with him knowing exact dates? What do you think that's going to affect? What do you expect to happen? His tone suggested that he believed I was overreacting, that my feelings were trivial. That conversation struck me deeply. It was as if, in his mind, the truth about my pregnancy, about our shared future, didn't matter at all. Instead, he treated the news as a minor inconvenience, something to be managed with a shrug and a wave of his hand. Since that confrontation, James had been giving me the silent treatment. For days, he ignored my calls and texts, and I was left in a state of isolation at a time when I needed support more than ever. To make matters worse, I found myself locked out of the shared Cash App account we use for our finances. Suddenly, I was stranded without access to funds, unable to purchase nutritious food to support my pregnancy or even new clothes that fit my changing body. Everything I owned had been left with my sister in the new city. My closet now consisted of 3 shirts, 2 pairs of bottoms, and a single jacket, all of which belonged to a life I was forced to leave behind. The physical hardships were matched only by the emotional toll. I had lost my job in the new city because there was no option to transfer, and now I faced mounting bills and the prospect of relying on others for basic necessities. The food in my refrigerator was meager, just applesauce, oatmeal, and milk, and I felt the weight of every unmet need pressing down on me. Throughout this ordeal, I found solace in the thought of sharing the news with James's parents. I had come to respect them immensely over the years. They were like second parents to me, offering kindness and guidance whenever I needed it. I believed that if they knew the truth about my pregnancy, they would offer support and perhaps even intervene in the situation with James. In my eyes, it was a matter of fairness. I had always been open and honest with them, and I trusted that they would treat me with the compassion I deserved. Yet, the silence from James grew heavier with each passing day. His refusal to engage left me feeling abandoned and confused. I never wanted him to distance himself from anything related to the baby. I wanted us to be partners in every way. I had never once doubted his commitment to our future, and now his behavior made me question everything. Was I simply overreacting, or was his silence a sign of something far more insidious? A sign that he no longer cared about me or the life we were supposed to build together? As days turned into weeks, the isolation and financial instability began to take their toll. I reached out to friends and family, seeking advice and comfort, but the responses were mixed. Some told me to be patient, to give James time to sort through his own issues, while others urged me to stand up for myself and demand that he take responsibility. I felt trapped in a situation where every choice carried the weight of my future. One chilly afternoon, as I sat alone in the small kitchen of my father's home, I stared into the depths of an empty mug of lukewarm tea. My mind replayed the conversation with James, the dismissive tone, the casual misinformation, and the cold logic that seemed to strip away any sense of partnership. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that his silence was not a temporary lapse, but a deliberate act of neglect. It was as if he had decided that my needs and the needs of our unborn child were no longer important to him. In that moment, the idea of telling his parents crossed my mind. Would it be wrong for me to take matters into my own hands and share the truth with the people who had always cared for me? I wrestled with the question late into the night, the silence of my surroundings echoing the silence in my heart. I had never wanted to create a rift or cause a scandal, but the mounting evidence of neglect and indifference left me no choice. I needed to be heard, and I needed help. I drafted and erased countless messages in my mind, imagining conversations with his parents, conversations where I explained not only my pregnancy, but also the painful neglect I was enduring from James. I pictured their kind faces, their concerned eyes, and the possibility that they might finally intervene. I knew that by telling them, I might further antagonize James. But I also knew that I could no longer stand alone in this struggle. Before I made any final decisions, I reached out to a trusted friend who had always been my rock in times of turmoil. I recounted every detail. The move to the new city, the discovery of my pregnancy, James's dismissive attitude, and the ensuing isolation that left me practically penniless. As I spoke, tears welled in my eyes, not only from the physical hardships, but from the deep emotional betrayal that cut to my core. My friend listened intently, offering words of comfort and advice. "You deserve to be treated with respect," she said softly. "If James can't see that this is about our future, then maybe it's time you took matters into your own hands. Tell his parents. Let them know what's happening. They care about you, and they might be the only ones who can help you right now." Her words resonated with me, and I realized that I was at a crossroads. I could continue to wait for James to come around, risking not only my physical health, but my emotional well-being, or I could speak up and reach out to the people who had always been a source of light in my life. The decision was agonizing, but I knew that staying silent any longer was not an option. As the day wore on, I resolved that I would indeed tell his parents the truth. I would not be the one to suffer in silence, while James left me to navigate this difficult journey alone. The fear of confrontation and the possibility of damaging my relationship with him were outweighed by the desperate need for support and fairness, for myself and for the baby growing inside me. I sat down at my desk and began composing a letter. Not just any letter, but one that laid out every detail with clarity and honesty. I explained the events leading up to my return to our hometown, the shock of the ultrasound, the promises we had made about sharing the news, and most importantly, the growing silence that now defined our relationship. I described the hardships I was facing, the financial strain, the isolation, and the emotional toll of being ignored by someone I had once trusted completely. I read and reread the letter, editing it until every sentence felt true and every word carried the weight of my experience. I knew that once I sent this letter to his parents, there would be no turning back. It was a leap of faith, a desperate act to reclaim the narrative of my life when everything else seemed to be slipping away. By the time I finished, dusk had settled over our small hometown, painting the sky in hues of deep blue and orange. I took a deep breath and printed the letter. With trembling hands, I sealed it in an envelope and addressed it to the family home where James's parents lived, a place that had always welcomed me with open arms and kindness. As I left the house that evening, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. I felt a mixture of fear, determination, and a glimmer of hope. I knew that what I was about to do might change everything. I might alienate James further, and there was no guarantee that his parents would react the way I hoped. But I also knew that I could no longer wait for him to come to his senses. My voice and the truth about my life needed to be heard. After I left the post office that cool evening, the weight of my decision pressed down on me. Every step I took along the quiet streets felt both liberating and terrifying. I clutched the envelope tightly as if it were a lifeline, knowing that with it I was laying my soul bare to the one people who had always cared for me, James's parents. I recalled the many times they had welcomed me into their home, shared meals, and offered words of comfort when I needed them most. I trusted them implicitly, and now I hoped that by telling the truth, I could finally receive the support I desperately needed. That night, as I lay in my small, unfamiliar bed at my father's house in my hometown, sleep eluded me. My mind replayed every detail from the past few weeks. The excitement of the ultrasound, the promises James had made about our future, and the bitter sting of his silence in the days that followed. I couldn't help but wonder what James would say if he ever learned that I had taken matters into my own hands. Would he be angry, or would he simply continue his cold indifference? I stared at the ceiling until the early hours of the morning, imagining the conversation I would have with his parents. I rehearsed every word in my mind, each sentence chosen carefully to explain the situation without painting me as desperate or vindictive. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't trying to cause drama. I was reaching out for help in a moment of vulnerability. The next morning, I awoke to a phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. It was an unfamiliar number, and my heart pounded as I answered, uncertain of what to expect. "Hello," I said softly, trying to steady my voice. "Is this Amanda?" came a calm, measured voice. I paused before replying, "Yes, this is Amanda." "Who's calling?" "This is Karen, James's mother." "I received your letter this morning," she said. There was a gentle pause, as if she was choosing her words with care. "I'm so sorry you've been going through all of this. I wish you had reached out sooner." I felt a flicker of relief mixed with apprehension. "Thank you, Karen." I didn't know what else to do. I felt completely alone. And James, he's been ignoring me. I need help, and I needed someone to know. Karen's voice was soothing yet firm. "Amanda, please know that you matter very much to us. James has always been a good boy, but sometimes adults make mistakes. I assure you, I'm here for you. Would you like to come over later today? I'd like to talk to you in person and figure out how we can help." Tears welled in my eyes at her genuine concern. "Yes, I'd appreciate that very much. Thank you." After our brief call, I sat quietly for a moment, letting Karen's words seep into me. In that vulnerable instant, I felt a small spark of hope. It wasn't a cure-all, and I knew there would be many difficult conversations ahead. But having someone on my side made the oppressive silence feel a little less heavy. I spent the rest of the morning making arrangements to meet Karen at their family home. Meanwhile, the days before that meeting passed in a disorienting blur. James continued his silence. No calls, no texts, not even a single acknowledgement of my messages. Each day, I struggled not only with the physical challenges of pregnancy and the constant worry about my dwindling finances, but also with the emotional isolation that his indifference imposed on me. I tried reaching out to friends for solace, but many were hesitant to take sides. Some offered kind words of encouragement, while others warned me to tread lightly. I found myself oscillating between moments of quiet defiance and deep despair, questioning if I had made the right decision. Every time I passed by the kitchen at home and saw the bare shelves where groceries once were, I felt a renewed pang of helplessness. The absence of simple comforts, like a warm meal or new clothes that fit, was a constant reminder of how isolated I had become. Finally, the day came when I was to meet Karen. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was modest yet reflective of the hope I was trying to nurture inside me. As I drove the familiar route to the house where James's parents lived, my thoughts raced with memories of family gatherings, warm hugs, and supportive smiles. I wondered if those memories could be resurrected to help mend the deep fissure that had grown between me and James, or they would simply serve as painful reminders of what I was losing. I arrived at the house a little before noon. The neighborhood was quiet, and the front yard was meticulously maintained. As always, I took a deep breath before knocking on the door. After a few moments, it swung open to reveal Karen, her eyes filled with both concern and quiet determination. "Amanda, come in," she said, stepping aside to let me pass. "We've been worried about you." Inside, the living room was warm and inviting. Pictures of family vacations and cherished moments adorned the walls, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the soft hum of a radio playing in the background. Karen led me into a comfortable seating area and offered me a cup of tea. I sat down, trying to steady my trembling hands as I clutched the envelope that had set all these events in motion. Karen's gaze was gentle but piercing. "I want to understand everything. Amanda, tell me, how long have you been pregnant? And what has James said, if anything?" I took a deep breath and recounted the events as clearly as I could. I told her about the ultrasound, about the excitement that quickly turned to worry when James started giving me the silent treatment, about the confusion over the misinformation he had passed on to his family, and about the financial struggles that had left me feeling utterly isolated. I also explained how I had felt abandoned when I found myself locked out of our shared Cash App account, and how, despite all the promises we had made together about starting a family, his behavior had grown increasingly dismissive and cold. Karen listened intently, nodding slowly as she sipped her tea. When I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Amanda," she said softly, "I understand how hard this must be for you. You are carrying our future in your womb, and you deserve to be supported every step of the way. I cannot imagine why James will behave this way, but I promise you that I will speak with him. We are family, and I won't allow you to be treated like you're disposable." Her words filled me with a cautious hope. "Thank you, Karen. I need to feel like I'm not alone in this. I need to know that someone cares." Karen reached out and gently took my hand. "I do care, Amanda, and I will do everything in my power to help you. I will talk to James, and I will make sure that he understands how important you and the baby are. You deserve love, respect, and support, and I won't let anyone, not even him, take that away from you." For the rest of that day, I remained at the house with Karen, speaking with her about the plans for the coming days. We discussed the possibility of having a family meeting, the need to clarify the misunderstandings that had taken root, and most importantly, the steps I could take to ensure that my needs were met. Karen promised to call James that very evening, and I left their home with a tentative sense of reassurance, though the gnawing uncertainty still lingered. That night, I waited by my phone for a message or a call from James. Hours passed, each minute stretching into an eternity. I replayed our last conversation in my mind, trying to catch any nuance that might explain his silence. But all I could hear was the echo of his indifferent words and the feeling of abandonment that had settled over me like a shroud. Finally, just before midnight, my phone rang. I jumped, nearly dropping it in my haste to answer. The caller ID showed James's name. With a pounding heart, I swiped to answer. "Hello." I managed, my voice wavering. There was silence for a long moment on the other end, and then, almost reluctantly, James spoke. "Amanda, I'm sorry." I couldn't hold back the torrent of emotions. "Sorry is enough, James. You promised me a future together. You promised we'd share everything. Our joys, our fears, our plans for family. And now, you're just gone silent. I feel like you've abandoned me." His voice was low and hesitant. "It's not that simple. I'm dealing with a lot right now, and I cut him off, tears threatening to spill. "Dealing with a lot? Amanda, I'm carrying our baby. I'm struggling to eat properly, to have enough money to get what I need, and all I get from you is silence. I need you, my partner, my love. I need you to be there." There was a long pause. I could almost feel the tension on the other end of the line. Then he said, I can't explain it all right now. I'm sorry, but I need time." Time. Those two words felt like a dagger. Time for what, James? For you to decide whether I matter? Because right now it feels like I don't. I heard him sigh heavily, a sound that carried both regret and resignation. "I never wanted you to feel this way. I don't know what to do about it." That was all he said before the line went dead. I stared at the screen, my heart aching with the realization that the person I had trusted for so long was slipping away. I knew that Karen would follow up with him tomorrow, but tonight, I was left alone with my doubts and the echo of unanswered questions. As I finally set my phone aside, I resolved that I would not let the silence define my future. I had taken a stand by telling his parents, and now I had to continue fighting for myself and for the life growing inside me. I didn't know what the coming days would bring, or if James would ever find the courage to step up. All I knew was that I would not wait passively while my world crumbled around me. I spent the rest of the night writing in my journal, pouring out every thought, every hurt, every flicker of hope that still remained. It was a cathartic release, a way to reclaim a piece of myself amid the chaos. I wrote about the woman I once was, the dreams I had for my future, and the strength I needed to muster in order to stand up for what was right. By dawn, as the first light of morning filtered through my window, I felt a small sense of resolve. Today, I would follow up with Karen and see if there was any progress. I would also continue to plan for the baby, prepare what little I could, even if it meant taking on extra shifts or seeking help from community resources. I wasn't going to let this situation break me. I had to be strong for myself and for the life I was about to bring into this world. I spent the next few days in a limbo of despair and determination. Every morning I woke with a heavy heart, My thoughts a chaotic storm of loneliness and resolve. The conversation with Karen, James's mother, had given me a sliver of hope, but the silence from James himself grew louder with each passing hour. I began to dread the phone's ring, dreading yet longing for any sound of his voice that might validate the promises we once shared. At home, I tried to maintain a routine, meager meals, long walks to clear my mind, and late nights scribble my feelings into a journal. I documented every call that went unanswered, every text that remained without reply. My diary became both my confidant and my record keeper. Each entry was a testimony to the isolation I felt and the strength I was summoning. I would reread old entries from happier times, remembering the laughter we shared, the gentle words of reassurance, and the dreams we built together. Those memories now contrasted painfully with the present, a world where I was left to navigate pregnancy, financial uncertainty, and emotional abandonment on my own. In one of those sleepless nights, as rain pounded softly on the window and the room was illuminated only by the pale light of my desk lamp, I made a decision. I could no longer wait for James to choose, to finally speak, to finally show up. I needed to confront him and, if necessary, force him to face the consequences of his silence. The thought of involving his parents had already set events in motion, but I wasn't ready to simply accept a half-hearted apology or a weak promise. I needed to know if the man I had loved for 6 years was still capable of caring, or if I had become nothing more than an inconvenience in his life. I called Karen again the following morning. Her steady voice on the other end of the line had a calming effect, but even she couldn't mask the underlying concern. "Amanda," she said gently, "I spoke with James this afternoon. He sounded distant. I told him you need a real conversation about us, about the future. He said he'd think about it, but nothing concrete came of it." Her words stung, and I could sense that his silence wasn't just indifference. It was a wall he was deliberately building. After hanging up, I knew I had to escalate things. I couldn't let this go on. That same afternoon, I decided to drive to the little cafe where we had spent so many afternoons planning a future together. The place was nearly empty, the usual hum of conversation replaced by a quiet solitude that matched my mood. I sat in a corner booth, eyes fixed on the door, waiting for him to appear. An hour later, James walked in. He looked older than I remembered, his eyes downcast and his shoulders slumped as if bearing a weight he refused to share. I beckoned him over. "James, we need to talk," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the tremor of emotion within me. He hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from me. "Amanda," he began, his tone cautious, "I've been meaning to—" I cut him off. "I know you've been meaning to say something, but your silence speaks louder than any apology. We planned for this. We dreamed about a future together. Now here I am, pregnant, struggling to eat healthy, struggling to manage everything on my own, while you choose to vanish into silence." He looked at me, eyes glistening with something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry, Amanda. I didn't know how to handle everything. My dad's situation, my license, all of it got to me. I thought I needed time to sort it out. I never wanted to hurt you. Hurt. Abandoned." I leaned forward, my voice rising. "Time to sort out? When I needed you by my side, you chose to disappear. You promised me that we'd share every part of our life, and now you treat me as if I'm an afterthought. I trusted you. I believed in you. I believed in us." He rubbed his temples and then looked away. "It's not that I don't care. I do care, more than I can put into words. But I'm scared, Amanda. Scared of the responsibilities, scared of failing you, of failing our baby." The vulnerability in his voice stirred something inside me, a bittersweet mix of longing and sorrow. "James, I'm scared too," I whispered. "But I need you. I need you to fight for us. I need you to show up, not just in words, but in actions." I paused, gathering the courage to ask what I'd been dreading. "Why didn't you tell your parents the truth? Why wait until I had to do it for you?" He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darkening with emotion. I couldn't face them. "I know how important they are to you. I thought I could fix everything without involving them, but it just got too complicated." I shook my head slowly. "James, I respect your desire to handle things on your own, but our baby deserves better. I deserve better. When I reached out to Karen, I hoped that, as my extended family, they could help bring you back to me, to the life we were planning. Instead, I'm left feeling more alone than ever. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe's background noise seemed to fade away as we sat there locked in a battle of unspoken words and shared pain. Finally, James said, "I promise I'll try to do better. Please, give me a little more time to figure this out." But time had already taken its toll on me. I stared at him, feeling the weight of every unanswered question and every unfulfilled promise. "I've been waiting, James. And every day that you remain silent, every day you let me shoulder this burden alone, it feels like you're slipping further away. I don't know if I can wait much longer." As tears welled in his eyes, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Amanda. I truly am. I'll fix this. I'll get my license. I'll talk to my parents properly, and I'll be there for you and the baby." His voice wavered as he spoke, and for a moment, I wanted to believe him. That conversation marked a turning point. Over the next several days, James began to slowly emerge from his shell of silence. He took concrete steps, scheduling an appointment to reinstate his license, calling his father to discuss the situation, and even sending a sincere message to his older sister explaining his inability to meet with me recently. His actions, though tentative, showed that he was starting to acknowledge the gravity of what was happening. Karen called again that evening, her tone more optimistic than before. "Amanda, James is starting to open up. He's apologized, and I think he understands now that your well-being, and that of the baby, is non-negotiable." I listened to her, trying to temper the cautious hope that had begun to stir within me. The promise of change was fragile, and I knew that actions would need to speak louder than words. Yet deep inside, I dared to imagine a future where we rebuilt what was once so strong, where silence was replaced by communication, and where I could trust a man I loved again. In the following week, as James worked diligently to reconnect with his family and prove his commitment, I focused on caring for myself and the baby. I began attending prenatal classes at a local community center, meeting other expectant mothers who shared their own stories of resilience and hope. I found solace in small victories, finally securing a part-time job that allowed me to buy healthier groceries, reuniting with old friends who offer emotional support, and even rediscovering the simple joy of preparing a nourishing meal. Slowly but surely, James's efforts began to show. He made a surprise visit one afternoon, arriving at my father's home with a bouquet of flowers and a look of earnest determination. "I'm here, Amanda," he said softly as he stepped through the door. "I'm not going to let you carry this burden alone." That day, we sat together on the porch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the yard. He explained the steps he had taken, from meeting with his parents to scheduling an appointment to reinstate his license. His words were tentative but filled with genuine remorse. "I know I've hurt you, and I can't change that overnight," he admitted. "But I want to be the partner you deserve, for our baby, for us." I listened, my emotions swirling, a blend of relief, skepticism, and a longing to believe in the man I once knew. "James, I need to feel like I'm a priority," I said quietly. "Not just an afterthought. When everything is convenient for you, I need you to communicate with me. I need you to let me know that I'm not alone in this." He squeezed my hand gently. "I promise, Amanda, I'm going to work on it. I'm going to be more present, more involved. I don't want to lose you. I want to build our future together." In that moment, a fragile bridge of understanding began to form between us. The journey ahead was still uncertain, and I knew that trust, once broken, would take time to mend. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw a flicker of the man I loved, someone willing to fight his inner demons and step up when it mattered most. The coming weeks were a delicate dance of rebuilding and cautious optimism. There were setbacks and moments when the old wounds threatened to reopen, days when James's phone would remain silent for hours, or when the stress of our circumstances would lead to tense arguments. Yet, amid the turmoil, there were also genuine moments of connection. Shared laughter over a simple meal, quiet evenings where we planned for baby's future, and heartfelt apologies that, although imperfect, were a step toward healing. One particularly crisp evening, as autumn leaves swirled around our small town, James and I sat on the back steps of my father's house. The air was cool, and the sky was painted in shades of deep purple and gold as the sun set. "I was thinking," James said slowly, "about how much we've taken each other for granted. I realize now that I should have been there for you from the start, not waiting for you to make decisions on your own. I'm truly sorry." I looked at him, feeling the warmth of the fading sun mingling with the warmth of his sincerity. "I know you are," I replied softly. "I just need to know that moving forward, we're in this together. No more silence, no more secrets." He nodded, determination replacing the uncertainty in his eyes. "No more silence. I promise." In the weeks that followed, our relationship began to find its footing again. The support from James's parents, especially Karen, was a steady beacon during those dark days. They reached out often, offering advice, assistance, and unconditional care. Their intervention had not only given me practical support, help with groceries, financial guidance, even the occasional ride to prenatal appointments, but it also helped James realize the consequences of his actions. Though our future remained uncertain and the road to rebuilding trust was long, I began to see a path forward. I learned that sometimes the strongest love is forged in the crucible of hardship, that the bonds of family and commitment can be mended even when they seem irreparably broken. I also learned that standing up for myself, voicing my needs and refusing to be ignored, was not an act of selfishness but one of self-respect. One day, as I was reviewing some paperwork for my prenatal classes, my phone buzzed with a message from James. "Let's meet for dinner tonight. I want to show you something." I agreed, though my heart pounded with both hope and apprehension. That evening, at a quiet restaurant we once frequented as a couple, James arrived with an envelope. "This is for you and the baby," he said, placing it gently on the table. Inside were savings account statements showing that he had started setting aside money for the future. A small gesture, perhaps, but one that spoke volumes about a commitment to making things right. As we sat there in the soft glow of candlelight, I realized that while the scars of betrayal would never fully disappear, the promise of a better tomorrow was something worth fighting for. I looked at James, his eyes reflecting the genuine regret and determination that had been so elusive before, and I whispered, "I believe in second chances." The rest of that night was a quiet celebration of tentative hope. We spoke of our dreams once more, the nursery painted in gentle hues, the family dinners filled with laughter, the shared responsibilities that would one day shape a life together. While the journey ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, for the first time in weeks, I felt a cautious optimism. In the end, I learned that the silence of abandonment could be broken by the honest efforts of two people willing to change. I discovered that sometimes you have to reach out to those who care, even if it means exposing your vulnerabilities. I learned that my voice was not something to be silenced by neglect, and that I had the right to insist on being heard. Today, as I continue this journey into motherhood, I hold on to that lesson every day. My relationship with James is still a work in progress, and we have many difficult conversations ahead. But I no longer feel alone. I have the support of people who care, family, friends, and even unexpected allies who stepped in when I needed them most. And while I will always remember the pain of those dark days, I now see them as a catalyst of strength and resilience I had discovered within myself.